What if I told you that the quietest girl in school, the one no one noticed, the one who walked with her head down and barely spoke a word, held a secret so powerful that when the school bully finally laid hands on her, his life changed forever? This isn't just a story about bullies and victims. This is about a moment that turned humiliation into strength, cruelty into regret, and silence into a voice so loud it echoed through the entire school. Stay with me until the end, because what happened in those 10 seconds will leave you speechless, and the lesson behind it might just change how you see people forever. Emily was the kind of girl who blended into the background. She wasn't poor, she wasn't rich, she wasn't brilliant, she wasn't failing. She was simply invisible. At school, people brushed past her like she didn't exist. She ate lunch alone by the window, sketching in her notebook, drawing worlds where people were kind, and courage wasn't something you had to prove. Her quietness wasn't weakness, though. Emily carried the weight of silence because, at home, silence was all she had left. Her father had passed away when she was 12, and her mother worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on. Emily had learned early on that if she wanted comfort, she had to find it in her drawings, her books, and in the hidden strength her father once told her about. But in every school, there's always someone who feeds off that silence, someone who mistakes kindness and shyness for weakness. His name was Brandon. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a grin that made teachers believe he was just being playful, Brandon ruled the hallways with sarcasm, pranks, and cruelty. And for some reason, he had his eyes set on Emily. It started small, snide comments about her clothes, her worn-out shoes, the way she never raised her hand in class. Then, his mockery grew into louder taunts, performed for an audience of laughing classmates. Emily tried to ignore him, lowering her gaze, holding her books tightly to her chest, whispering to herself that it would end eventually. But one Friday afternoon, in the middle of the cafeteria, Brandon decided to take it too far. Emily was sitting at her usual table, sketching a landscape. The cafeteria buzzed with laughter and chatter, but in Emily's corner, it was just the scratch of her pencil. Brandon's friends nudged him, daring him to make the mouse squeak. He walked up to her table, towering over her, shadows stretching across her drawing. "Hey, quiet girl," he said, snatching the notebook from her hands. "What's this?" "Doodles. You think you're some kind of artist?" Emily's heart pounded in her chest, but she stayed still, her eyes fixed on the table. "Give it back," she whispered. "Or what?" Brandon smirked. He flipped through her drawings, mocking every page. "Whoa, trees, birds, clouds, what a masterpiece. Maybe you can sell this to a toddler for $1. The cafeteria erupted in laughter. Emily's face burned red, but still she didn't move. She had endured insults before, but then Brandon did something he had never done before. Something that would spark everything. He placed his hand on her shoulder and shoved her lightly, making her stumble back in her seat. The moment his hand touched her, something inside Emily shifted. Her father's words, long buried, roared back into her memory. "Don't let anyone define your worth, Emily. You have more strength in you than you'll ever know. And when the time comes, you'll see it." The cafeteria went silent. Everyone leaned in, waiting for Emily to shrink back, to cry, to let Brandon win. But instead, she stood up slowly, her small frame facing his towering figure. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the cafeteria like a blade slicing the air. "Don't ever touch me again." But Brandon laughed, reaching out as if to push her again. And that's when it happened. 10 seconds. That's all it took for Brandon's world to turn upside down. As his hand lunged toward her, Emily's reflexes, honed in secret from years of martial arts classes her father had enrolled her in before he passed, kicked in. She grabbed his wrist in one swift motion, twisted it, and stepped aside with such precision that Brandon's body lost balance and he stumbled forward, crashing onto the cafeteria floor. Gasps filled the air. Trays clattered. 100 pairs of eyes widened in shock. Emily didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply stood there, calm, steady, looking down at him with the same quietness she had always carried. But now it wasn't weakness. It was power. Brandon scrambled to his feet, his face red with humiliation. He wanted to fight back, but something in Emily's eyes stopped him. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was certainty. Certainty that she wouldn't let herself be a victim. Certainty that he had crossed a line he could never uncross. The principal, who had witnessed everything from across the room, rushed over. Brandon tried to twist the story, claiming she attacked him. But voices rose from every corner of the cafeteria, voices of kids who had stayed silent for too long. "No, sir," she told him not to touch her. He grabbed her first. She just defended herself. For the first time, the crowd sided with Emily. The quiet girl who had always been invisible was now the center of attention, not for her silence but for her strength. Brandon was taken to the office. His arrogance, his dominance, his power, it all crumbled that day. And Emily, she walked out of the cafeteria with her notebook in hand, head held high. The news spread like wildfire. Some students cheered her, some admired her courage, and a few even apologized for not standing up for her sooner. Emily's drawings, once mocked, became symbols of her resilience. She didn't become the loudest girl in the room, but she no longer needed to hide. And Brandon, he learned a lesson he would never forget. The hands that once shoved others now trembled with the memory of 10 seconds that destroyed his pride. From that day forward, he never touched another student again. Emily never sought revenge, and she never bragged about what happened. She simply lived her life with the quiet strength her father had always known she carried. And to anyone who dared mistake her silence for weakness again, she had already proven her point. Because sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest power. Never underestimate someone just because they are quiet, shy, or reserved. Silence is not weakness, it's strength in disguise. And sometimes it only takes 10 seconds to remind the world that everyone deserves respect.